We're continuing our series, Advent, that we started 5 weeks ago. And I know some of you think Advent starts next week. Well, it doesn't. It started 2,000 years ago. So, that's where we're at. And I want to start with a story. You're probably wondering, what on earth does the word engagement, if you have a bulletin, have to do with Advent? Well, I want to tell you a story about a young girl who dreamed of being married. She looked so forward to the day. And finally, when the time was right, she met a guy. Now, that guy had been trying to get her attention for quite a while. That guy had sacrificed for her. That guy had, done everything he could to get her to fall in love with him. And finally, she realized, oh, that's the guy. And so they got engaged. Well, this is an old story. It's actually a Hebrew tradition. And so they got engaged. And, well, you'll know part of this story because part of this story is this word that in English we call the betrothal. It's what Mary and Joseph were. They'd gotten engaged, but they weren't yet married. So this bride-to-be is so excited. And not unlike modern brides today, she's looking at all the magazines and she's going to all the stores. Well, technically back then she'd have been sewing her own dress and she'd have been starting to make the linens that they would have in their house. Turns out this guy's a carpenter. He's building the house of her dreams where they will spend their happily ever after. So he goes off, as the Hebrew tradition is, and he prepares a house. In the Hebrew tradition, by the way, it's either on the property or directly connected to his parents' house. So he's not moving far from Dad. But he's building their house, a place for them to dwell, a place for them to live. And she's busy about her getting ready for the wedding. But in her getting ready for the wedding, she's so excited, somewhere between 10 and 85 bridesmaids are selected. And, we don't do any of that now, right? But they get so caught up in all of the stuff and all the excitement and all of the simple things. Now, every day, her fiance is wanting to spend time with her. She's running around with her girlfriends. She's busy about, I'm busy, don't you know there's a wedding coming? And he just he's working hard, getting the place ready, and then he wants to just be with her. And she's so distracted by other things that she doesn't spend any time with her fiance. So finally the day comes. And in the Hebrew tradition, the father of the bride plays a key role. Okay? Because the groom has to go and make arrangements to pay for the bride. And in doing so, he has to say, look, see, everything's ready. I can care for my bride. Look at this, it's the house of her dreams, see? And everything over here. And so the groom has been getting ready to negotiate with the father. And the father is supposed to be aware of, is the bride ready? So in the Hebrew tradition, that's when the father decides, okay, yeah, you guys can get married now. Well, while that's a true story, it's not actually about an ancient Hebrew. It's our story. And we're the bride. Jesus has gone to prepare a place for us. And he will come again, and he will receive us unto himself, that where he is, there we will be also. Sound familiar? And we, the church, are the bride. And while He's prepared a place for us and He wants to spend time with us, we're pretty busy. I mean, we call Him when we need Him, like any bride needs their fiance's opinion on something. What shade of mauve should we have in the flowers? I'll come back to the wedding analogy in a minute. Well, actually in 15 minutes. But here's the first thought we have to have today. If we really believe Jesus is coming back to receive His bride, how should we be ready? Now, I tell you that little parable so that you can understand two of the teachings that are in the text today in Matthew 24 and Matthew 25. Matthew 24, Matthew 25, and we're going to finish 24 today, and we're just going to refer to 25. You know these stories in Matthew 25 so well. I'm not going to preach them. I'm just going to give you the applications, and you're going to have to live with them. But we, in Christ, are engaged. We're just waiting for the marriage supper of the Lamb. All these great eschatological terms. That means end times. Are we? Or are we going to all the stores and putting on all the Ritz? And are we more excited about the right dress than preparing to live with our spouse for eternity? There's TV shows that are very popular that highlight this exact dysfunction in our society. When I was in college, we used to joke, I won't tell you which Christian ministry it was, so if it slips, I'm sorry. But we would sit around the cafeteria, some of us brothers and some of the sistren, at a state university. The Christians would kind of huddle once in a while. Usually it was Thursday evening or maybe Tuesday just before the meeting on campus of the ministry. And there were 2 or 3 girls who, literally had never been on a date since high school. And that was only because they had to find a date. It was Sadie Hawkins. But they had their weddings entirely planned. And when we get along as guys, we would talk about, priorities. Maybe you should find a date before you buy a dress. Make sure it'll fit. We get our priorities all just completely upside down. One of my less kind friends would say, I could marry or date any one of you, you'd all be the same. Whoa. What are we thinking about when we think about being the bride of Christ, being the church, being active in getting ready for that day when the bridegroom comes back and gathers us up and takes us to the feast? When the Father says, all right, go get your bride. We have a lot of countdowns. And by now you know I am not a fan of timelines or countdowns. But I'll bet you guys all know that by the time I say amen, there will only be 30 and 1/2 days left until Christmas. Literally, it's coming. Right? If you're really astute, okay, it's 10:30, so that's 13 and a half hours, not 30 and a half. It's 30 days, 13 and a half hours. Oh my goodness, I better get ready. We worry about that, right? But here's what happens, right? What is the point of Christmas? Why do we give gifts at Christmas? Oh, to remind us that Jesus was God's gift to us. Is that right? Well-raised children. Yes, that's right. Okay, so why is Black Friday bigger than Christmas? Why is the day I go buy the gift, I start to obsess about the deal instead of the reason I'm giving the gift? Well, Black Friday, well, that's old hat. Now you got Cyber Monday, right? That's where the best deals are. because your box store can't match Amazon. Oh, here's a judgment. Why is Giving Tuesday last in line? If you didn't spend it on Friday or Monday, if you got a little left, this is the day we give to all the charities so that we can celebrate giving. I know none of us do that. I'm just saying, I think the bride's mixed up. The world we expect to be mixed up, but are we mixed up? The day after we give thanks for everything we have, we go elbow shove and push and knock out teeth to get a remote control car at 75% off. Again, none of you. Remember when Black Friday used to mean getting out of bed early? Now it means you just barely got the dishes washed after the Thanksgiving meal and you head for the store on Thursday? What is this Advent about? So next Sunday, the wreath will be up here. What's it about? Are we ready for the coming of the Messiah? Or are we chasing the deals, wanting stuff, by the way, which is a sign of total immaturity, right? When I was a little kid, not saying I've grown up, but when I was a little kid, my grandma got what was called the Blue Book. It was a hardcover, 250-page catalog of stuff that we couldn't afford. It was like the pop-up ads on Facebook today for you young'uns. Oh, man, click on that. Turns out it's a Japanese or Chinese scam. Okay, just saying. We would sit there and we would fold over the pages and we would write little notes. And I want this real remote control helicopter that actually flies. It was only, and this is in the 1970s, it was only $600 and some. Oh, we would just drool on those pages. That's what kids do. Kids want what they can get. The immature believers want, hey God, what can you give me? We're a lot like Black Friday. We're a lot like the Hebrew bride, more excited about the dress than eternity with her beloved. So, is Jesus coming back? Thank you. The Rows are going to answer all my questions today. The Simons are a little slow. I'm not so sure about the rest of y'all. Is Jesus coming back? Yes. There isn't a Christian church in the world, regardless of everything else we disagree on, there isn't a Christian church in the world that doesn't believe this. Somebody told me a couple weeks ago, I won't even look in their direction. Yeah, I grew up in this church. We believed it. We just never talked about it or thought about it. Well, that's kind of why we're doing this series. We believe he's coming back. Let's fight about the details. No. He's coming back. So, Matthew 24. When's it going to happen, Pastor? Again, $1,000,000 question. Are we there yet? The disciples ask. And Jesus answers, verse 36, only the Father knows. Multiple times in his ministry on earth, he was confronted with this question, and he said, it's not for you to know, not even for me to know, because I'm in my earthly form. This answer that Jesus gives, that only the Father knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son. The Son is in his bodily form. Philippians 2, he's given up the right to know. He's given up the right to be called God. Only God knows when. But does God know when? Yes. Yes. In our premillennial view, yes. God's not waiting for us to clean the world up enough that then it's safe for him to come back. We're not some ghetto where we have to reduce the crime rate just far enough that now it's safe for Jesus to return. By the way, when he returns, he's going to take care of the entire crime rate with a word from his mouth. God definitely knows when. This is not a new thought, by the way. The Old Testament prophet Zechariah, you all have that memorized, chapter 14. Start reading in verse 1, but when you get to verse 7, it says, "And that day, the day that the Lord comes, that day when he judges the earth," he's talking not about Christmas, he's talking about return. "That day will be a unique day which the Lord knows." It will be a day unlike any other day ever. Zechariah, the Old Testament prophet, hundreds of years before Jesus came at Christmas, they just called it his birthday back then. He said he's going to come. And it's a day that God knows. It is a set day. It's going to happen. If that's true, that there is a day when the wedding will happen, that the groom will come in a procession, all of heaven's angels with him, the sound of a trumpet and a mighty shout from heaven, and all the world will notice, and those who are not his will weep. Paraphrasing what we've been talking about for 4 weeks. When the groom comes to get the bride. Well, when is that? The Father knows. He's coming. This is what he tells his disciples. Chapter 24 and verse 36. "That day, that hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father." Zechariah said, "A day known to the Lord only," or the Lord alone. Jesus is quoting their own Bible to them, saying, you should know that you don't need to know. God told Daniel that. God told the prophets that. I'm telling you that. You don't need to know when, you need to be ready. By the way, verse 47 or 37 and following, it'll be a normal day to the rest of the world. Everyone else will just keep calm and carry on. Everyone else, verse 37 says, will be going on. It'll be just like it was back in Noah's day. Do you remember the Noah story? Right? 2 by 2 into the ark. Who didn't get in the ark? Do you want to come and preach? Man, a lot of answers are correct in the second row today. Sinners didn't get in the ark. Well, sinners did, 8 of them. But not the ones who didn't believe. 1 Peter 3, 18, get to 19. 19 tells us there were only 8 who were saved through the water. But the days of Noah that Jesus is referring to, Peter writes about, and he says, it'll be just like that. They were wicked back then, and they just kept being wicked. And Noah was building an ark, which was a sign of the coming judgment. And Noah was preaching, we are told, while he's building the ark, that there's a coming judgment, and everyone else scoffed, mocked, and carried on. And Jesus says that's how it will be. In these last days, Paul writes, in the last days, even believers will say, he's not coming, nothing's changing, it's just like yesterday. We'll get married, we'll worry about all the earthly stuff. We won't think or worry about his coming. But in these next 5 verses, he says, he's coming. And when he does, it will be just like it was in the days of Noah. By the time they realize it, it's too late. The door is shut. Quick cross-reference, come back to it later, chapter 25. 5 virgins are not ready. They come back and the door is shut. Because they weren't ready for the groom to come. When they see him coming on the clouds in great power and glory, They'll realize we're done messed up. But that's everyone else, not us. Because we can get into the ark right now. We can, borrowing the next analogy, become his sheep right now. We can trust him and his word by faith right now. Before he comes. It will be too late after. By the way, one of my favorite 9th grade questions, which I've never really found the answer for, is the other 5 who had the oil, the faithful, wise virgins, didn't share the need to be ready with the other 5? Or did they share and the other 5 just said, "Ha, you're foolish"? And the fool called the wise foolish. Are we doing evangelism, or we got our lamp full and we're just standing here waiting? Because there's 5 other virgins who aren't ready. That's chapter 25. I wasn't going to preach that. So when he comes, we should be awake. Jesus says, this is how it will be, so make sure you stay awake. Verse 42. Okay? Verse 42, therefore keep watch. NIV, ESV says stay awake. Keep watching because you do not know what day your Lord will come. Oh, I'll worry about that later. Might not be later. Well, just for today, just for a little while, I'll go indulge in this. You don't know when he's coming. And while you're just for a little while distracted and just for a little while indulging, look at verse 43, 44. Hey, if the owner of the house knew what hour the thief was going to come, he'd have stayed awake. Who's the thief? The enemy? Satan? Did you steal my notes this week? Stay awake, because there is a deceiver right now. There is a deceiver who's telling you, this doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. All dogs go to heaven. All roads get there. Try and be a good person. There's a deceiver right now. Jesus describes this in John chapter 10. It's the Good Shepherd story. He says, I'm the shepherd, my sheep know my voice. So I'm the good shepherd. I'll lay down my life for my sheep. And then he gives this illustration of his sheep gathered into a pen at which he is the door. And the illustration is that there was a gap in these rock walls and the shepherd would lay there, so anything that was going to try and get to the sheep had to go through him. Any enemy danger had to go through him. So in the pen are his sheep. And he says, John chapter 10, 8 and 9, the thief comes to steal, to kill, to destroy. If we'd thought that there's an enemy out there who's trying to steal, kill, and destroy us, we'd lock the door. We'd make sure that we're protected. Jesus says there is an enemy who's trying to deceive us, but he's the shepherd who has come to give us life, and life abundantly. Do not be deceived. Staying alert, being in this word so that we know. Some guy comes and claims to be Jesus and he's wearing glasses, he's probably not Jesus. You got to go back to week 2 for that one. Actually, it was week 1. Some guy comes and says, hey, Jesus came back in 1984. Well, that's possible. I would have missed that one in 1984 because I was living a little differently. No. The deceiver has come. The deceiver is coming. The deceiver will come. Don't be deceived. The master of the house had known that the thief was coming. He'd have made sure to lock the door. He'd have made sure he was there to protect his possessions. We'll get to the possessions in a second. There'll be two types of people when the Messiah comes. There'll be those who've been deceived, and those who'll be glad to see him. Then he tells this story to illustrate it of wise and faithful servant versus wicked servant. So you get down to verse 48 and keep going. 45, sorry. Who's the faithful, wise servant that his master has set over his household? Do you know that you're in charge of God's household? And not just like the elders and the pastor, every one of us is to care for, to feed, and meet the needs, and protect from deception and from theft and from kill and destroy those around us. The faithful and wise servant feeds Jesus' sheep, Peter on the shore. You love me? Feed my sheep. Take care of my people. But the wicked servant says, oh, my master's delayed. He's not coming back. I can just do what I want. And the wicked servant in this illustration starts to hang out with the people who want nothing to do with the master and who want to squander and abuse and actually use his goods for other purposes than what the master has. If you read through that, he goes out and hangs with the drunkards and the ne'er-do-wellers in town. My name's on the business card. What's it matter how I live while he's gone? Jesus calls that a wicked servant. We're supposed to be wise and faithful. What does wise and faithful look like? The next chapter has 3 modern-day illustrations. And I used modern because they were and are dead on. The first illustration is the bridesmaids. The bridesmaids in that story that I started with, in the Hebrew tradition, their only job was not to go shopping with the bride, but to process with the groom. And as a kid, I used to hear this story and think, well, there's people who they didn't get into the wedding reception because they didn't. That's like an unfair thing. No. It's not that they were invited and they showed up and it turned out to be 2 weeks instead of 7 days. Their only job was to be ready to process with the groom. And these didn't prepare. They weren't acceptable. Our modern illustration, if you went to a wedding and the first 4 bridesmaids were matching dresses to the bride's colors and everything else, and the last 4 bridesmaids that tried to get in were wearing flip-flops and bikinis. And it wasn't a Hawaiian-themed wedding. They're not dressed. They're not ready for the occasion. They're not part of the wedding party. They've not given attention to what they were supposed to be doing. The next illustration he gives is that, again, this master who gives out the talents. And we blame it on God because this is how you are, so that's why I didn't do what I was supposed to do because you're God, you're not fair, God. I know people like that. And then the third illustration, and we've bounced off of it all kinds of times in the last 5 weeks, these sheep and these goats. These are the modern illustrations he gives to say, I'm coming back, you won't know when, stay awake, be ready, Oh, by the way, here's what it looks like to be ready. You're a bridesmaid whose lamp can be lit. You're a servant who's stewarding well what God the Master has given you. And thirdly, you're taking care of the least of these. That's what it looks like to be ready. Well, God, I would have, but see, on Black Friday, there was this fireplace that had neon lights and a disco ball. And so I drove by the homeless guy because I had to get to Walmart. Sorry, I shouldn't mention a store. Get out your pens. I'm going to quit. I'm going to start meddling. We have to be ready. We have to be his children by faith in Jesus Christ, be his sheep. We have to be in his fold. If you have not received the gift of salvation through Jesus Christ, when he comes back, it will be too late. And if we know people like that, we have to be sharing our oil. We have to be giving them the light to be ready. Secondly, what are your talents? What are your gifts? Use them for him. Use them for him. And many of you are doing this. This is not you're not doing it, you all need to step up. But this is just our reminder. What I have is from him. And it's supposed to be for him in the guise of others. And this season, I'm about to get really specific. I'm only going to give you 5 ways you can do that. But if there's 162 of us in here this morning, I don't know, I just made up a number. It's probably 148. What did you count, James? There's 148 ways to do that. I got an encouraging card yesterday. Some of you still handwrite in cursive encouraging cards. And that meant a lot. I watched people help each other yesterday. We have a project going on out here, and a bunch of community members helping a young man earn an Eagle Scout award, and people using and giving their equipment and their time and their talents. All right, you ready for the 5? Love and serve the least of these. Be a sheep, not a goat. So, thought out and prepped. Oops, I thought I had a slide. I don't. I have a page in my notebook instead. 5 serving opportunities. Hope Gospel Rescue Mission. They're collecting coats. We collect food. It just got delivered this week. They had a banquet 2 weeks ago. They have food baskets they're putting together. They're in need of coffee. They're in need of coats. They're in need of foil pans to cook turkeys in. They're in need of, if you have spare food, you did a big family event, you got leftovers, bring it to them. They'll use it. They'll feed people who are hungry. They're in need of people to serve time. There's brochures about Hope Gospel Rescue Mission out on the table. Probably not one for everybody, but if you want to know more about it, there. This week, there's a meal in town. We call it the Community Thanksgiving Meal. It's being hosted at the Methodist Church, and we're grateful for all they're putting on. And we're cooking a few turkeys, but they need hands on Thursday. The meal's at 12:30. So here's some ways your hands can be involved. You could go help serve the food. That'd be one way. You could invite a neighbor who doesn't have any place to Thanksgiving to your house, or you don't like doing dishes like I don't like doing dishes, invite them to the community meal. Bring a dish to share, the turkeys, the ham, the stuffing, the potatoes, that's all taken care of. Bring a side dish or a dessert, and invite someone who has a need to a community meal. Or, you know there's someone who has a meal. Can I throw you under the bus? Get in touch with Eric or I, and we'll get their address and their number to the people prepping the meals. Because every year we send out a couple dozen or more takeout meals. You could drive takeout meals. Take you about 30 minutes on Thursday. Change somebody's day. Community Thanksgiving meal this week. This week on Saturday, here's the time, from 10 till noon. I didn't say 12 till noon, Katie. I did really well there. 10 till noon this Saturday, we're going to be decorating the church. You have a little decorative spirit? You have some muscles to get the trees down? We'll get that done this week. I mean, I say 10 till noon. If the normal crew shows up, we'll be done by 11:30. If you all show up, we'll be done at 10:15. But it doesn't mean we don't need you. It's a lot of fun. Come and serve. Number 4, don't decorate the church. Go decorate your neighbor's place. You know somebody who needs help? You want to hang your pastor's lights? No, don't. I have Christmas mafia in my house. It's happening Wednesday. How can you serve? Okay, that's 4. You ready for number 5? And this is a big one. In our community, 270 plus children and families get impacted by the Christmas store. It's 3 weeks out, December 14th from 8 to noon. Put it on your calendar. I have a personal goal of seeing 30 people from our church help with Christmas store. And literally, if you show up at 8, you might be a gift wrapper, if that's your gift. Please do it if it is your gift, please. The rest of us struggle and we use a lot of bags and staples, okay? You might be able to just take a young child. They've got a list of 5 names. And you say, oh, what do you think your grandma would like? She likes perfumes and candles. Oh, here's a candle. Do you think that would work? And you put it in a box, and you go around with this little one, and they fill a box with 4 or 5 gifts, and you bring them over to the wrapping station, and somebody wraps it all for you, and then you bring them back to their parents or to their waiting area. That's how hard it is to serve. You could be a greeter, you could be a wrapper, you could wrap, it's so easy. But every year, we're hoping enough people show up. Between now and then, if you have things you want to donate, like new items or new items, just little gifts. Think about, what would I give my uncle's cousin? Well, he likes hammers. All right, put a hammer, get it to Jill Schmidt. She'll wrap it up, and some dad will get a hammer from their little kid at no cost to their family. And 75 to 100 families, over 250 kids every year. We need to be a part of that, because that's what sheep do. That's what sheep do when they're waiting for their wedding day. We're going to stand and we're going to recite our belief. We didn't do it last week. I ran over again this week. Sorry, Sam. Before we close with the doxology, we're going to confess our belief in the second coming of Jesus Christ together. Let's recite this together. We believe in the personal, bodily, glorious return of Lord and Jesus Christ. The coming of Christ at a time known only to God demands constant expectancy and demands our believer to godly living, sacrificial service, and energetic mission. Amen. I told you English is hard.